to ask the Minister the action she has taken to enable First na Gaeilge to reopen the Scéim Forbartha Líonraí Gaeilge, please.
Cathaoirleach, and thanks, Deputy Tully. Scéim Forbartha Líonraí Gaeilge is First na Gaeilge's multi-annual community scheme to promote, protect and ingrain the Irish language in particular areas, with an emphasis on the development and implementation of comprehensive language plans for the areas that are part of the scheme. There are currently 36 Irish language groups, North and South, funded through the scheme, including 9 grantees, with a number of the areas which have already been designated as Irish language networks or Gaeltacht service towns. The remaining 27 grantees under the scheme are at various different levels depending on their current stage of development. Structural progression has been built into the scheme with a focus on the current stage of development of the applicant. 3 stages of development have been developed as part of this scheme: higher level, intermediate level and basic level. It would be hoped that groups at the basic and intermediate levels would progress over time to the next level, subject to successful implementation of their agreed multi-annual programmes. In accordance with government policy on the Irish language, the emphasis of this scheme is on longer-term and more strategic planning, following the principles of language planning. The scheme began in January of 22 and has funded committed up to December of 24. It is expected that a further iteration of the scheme will be advertised in 24. Over €2.8 million has been provided to groups both north and south of the border under the scheme for 22 and 23. And as the Deputy will be aware, Forest na Gaeilge is part of An Forest Teanga, the North-South language body co-sponsored by my department and the Department of Communities in Northern Ireland. On this basis, all matters relating to the budget for the North-South language body must be approved by the North-South Ministerial Council. And my department has again provided an additional allocation of €700,000 for North-South cooperation in its budget for 24. And unfortunately, it is not currently possible to release this funding to the language body due to the absence of NSMC meetings.
I suppose Irish language community organisations are doing great work with limited resources, and they're serving an ever-growing demand, and they need to be adequately funded and properly supported. And a number of these groups exist in my own constituency of Cavan, Monaghan, and it's a constituency that tells a very different tale when you compare the two counties. So in Cavan we need a lot more Gaelscoileanna. Monaghan's community groups need more resources because they need to be able to better provide Irish-speaking children a chance and a reason to use the language outside of the Gaelscoil. And so funding for this work is provided through First na Gaeilge's SFLG scheme. But they feel like since the pandemic there's been a large pent-up demand for the reopening of the scheme. And I know you're explaining why it can't be, but is there some way that the community organisations can be supported? I mean, you have groups springing up in towns all over the country, but even in Cavan there's 2. There's one in Gael Munkul in Cootehill and Cavan, Gaeilge and Cavan in Cavan, and they've opened recently. And I'm just wondering if, can support be given to the Irish language community organisations and recognise the importance of the work by, ensuring that there's ring-fence additional funding through Forest na Gaeilge to allow the scheme to reopen for applications.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And as the Deputy beside you will know, the Department do give groups outside of the Forest na Gaeilge application process, like Blackley le Gaeilge and Gaeilge le Gaeilge, they do give support. So I think, look, what might be helpful is if I can take the details of some of the projects that you're talking about in Cavan and Monaghan, and certainly, look, I have my officials in the department have a look at them. But you're right with regard to people who, particularly people who want to rear their children through the medium of Irish, or who want to school them through the medium of Irish. One thing I would say, and it's probably easier, and Deputy O'Sullivan is smiling at me, one thing is easier for me to say to Trivan na Berlin or Trivan na Gaeilge is an Aspen winning, the lack of confidence that people have. We were all brought up going to school for 8 years in primary and 5 years in secondary. And look, there's a fundamental question as to, when I was put into the job that I have at the moment, my biggest difficulty, and I think most people's biggest difficulty, is their confidence, and their confidence in Irish. And it's in all of us, only sometimes you have to dig it out probably a bit more than you have to dig out other things. And I want to thank Deputy O'Sullivan and the committee for digging it out of me. But I think the lack of confidence that most of our peers of our age group have is the saddest thing actually that confronts the Irish language. And I think if you have specific projects in Cavan and in Monaghan that you want me to have a look at, I certainly will do that. No, I absolutely agree with you. I went to school for 13 years and I mean, I have lots of Irish in my head, but to actually have the confidence to speak it. And I suppose that's why we need to support community organisations to actually reach out to people, and people can join these organisations and use whatever Irish they have, because if you don't use it, you lose it. And I suppose,
in the month coming up to the budget, like, there were 138, I think, community organisations from around the country came together to formulate and propose to the government an ambitious new investment plan for the Irish language. And I suppose they want to address the long-standing issues around funding and particularly the lack of support for groups doing the work on the ground. I mean, foremost, the proposals look to reverse austerity-era cutbacks and fix the situation. You've got Forbartha na Gaeilge and Údarás na Gaeilge. They're in receipt of less funding from the state today than 20 years ago. And I mean, I think that has to be addressed, because I really think there is an appetite here in this country to actually revive the language. But we need to support those on the ground in the communities as well as in the schools to do that.
Yeah, just the Deputy, with regard to Údarás na Gaeilge, look, they've had record years in terms of the employment that they've created, and I can provide, certainly look in tabulated form, the progress that the Department has made in reversing some of the financial difficulties that the Department had for the medium of the Irish language. But I think one thing that's really important, and I take from Deputy Tully's question, Count Corla, is someone who has an interest in the Irish language isn't afraid to raise it in the medium of English. And look, as somebody who has had to relearn it on 3 different occasions, when I went to college and now again, I think it's as important for people who have an interest in the Irish language in this House not to feel that they can raise it through the medium of English, that they feel that they have to be able to raise it through the medium of Irish only. And it's actually refreshing to hear a deputy come in and give their experiences in their own constituencies and maybe challenge me and challenge some of the factual inaccuracies, which I'll come back to in written answer by way of the funding this year. But it's refreshing to hear that, because I think if more deputies did, it certainly would, I think, give a heart to an awful lot of people who feel that they can't raise the issue about their native language because they have that aspin we need.
Thank you, Minister.